Okay, that was a spider, and I had to kill it. Hyperparathyroidism, too much calcium in the blood. Hypo, not enough. And hyperparathyroidism can actually be a response from hypothyroidism, but the main thing is if someone's hyperparathyroid, think of the same thing as hyperthyroid. Get them to an ENT and have them do an ultrasound because chances are they've got a parathyroid mass that's causing it. Okay, so how to treat that? In the hospital, I use calcium gluconate, but in the book, it does have a good calcium mimetic, which is Cinacalcet. I'm probably not saying that right. I'm going to be hands honest with you. I've never prescribed it before, but basically, it replaces the calcium such that the parathyroid is no longer convinced that it needs to be that hyperactive. Okay, that's pretty much what there is to it. Main thing is get them to a otolaryngologist and figure out why that parathyroid is so hyper. Hypoparathyroidism is a lot simpler. Let's just give them some calcium. Okay, calcitriol or I can't remember what the other one is. With the calcium and vitamin D supplement, I give that a lot too. That usually will do the trick. And I see parathyroid disease far less than thyroid, but just be aware of it. Other issues. So, syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone. What does that mean? It's a big word, but if you just break it down, it's really easy. It's a syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone. So, antidiuretic hormone is the hormone that causes your body to retain fluid. Okay, it's an aldosterone. It's an aldosterone thing, but is usually a normal thing. There's a certain amount of fluid we want to get rid of. So, if it's inappropriate, that means it's not normal, and it's already an antidiuretic. So that means it's really anti-diuretic when it's inappropriate. So what will happen is people will come in to your clinic very confused, very lethargic, a whole host and array of symptoms, and you'll check their basic metabolic panel and you'll note that their sodium is 121. And it's because it's diluted. They've got way too much it's not that simple, but that's actually a really good indicator. You'll also notice their renal function is probably not that well. You'll learn more about that in pathophysiology. You're probably not going to treat that in your clinic depending on symptoms. If they're very symptomatic, I would send them to the hospital. Otherwise, diuretics are usually pretty good. Now, the book doesn't really talk about syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone. Well, the opposite of that is diabetes insipidus, where you've got too much diuretic hormone going on, or not. Actually, it's not too much diuretic hormone. I'm sorry, that's actually completely scientifically wrong. You don't have enough anti-diuretic hormone. So, treatment for that is the medication called vasopressin, which is anti-diuretic hormone. Okay. Diabetes insipidus, these people are drinking water like there's no tomorrow because they're peeing out like there's no tomorrow, and there's not any other explanation for it. Some of the other things that are similar to vasopressin, they're pituitary regulated drugs. One of them we'll talk about is probably more of a hospital setting sort of thing, oxytocin, which we actually have synthesized, and we use that to induce labor by causing contractions. That's great. This isn't a mother-baby class, so know it well for whatever, but that's not going to be on the quiz. Desmopressin, DDAVP. That's very similar to vasopressin. It just, instead of it actually being antidiuretic hormone, it works on the kidneys to retain And on page 212, there's a little deal that says spotlight on diabetes insipidus. And if you'll read down on the third sentence, it says the result of a lack of antidiuretic hormone. Okay. So even though it's not a pathophysiology class, it seems like it could be a good quiz question. Skip over page 213, octreotide. That's got very limited uses. I mostly use it in situations, people who have hepatic portal hypertension. It's good for that. Otherwise, you're probably not going to use much sandostatin, so don't worry about that. But over on 214 through 217, we're talking about some more adrenal things, particularly corticosteroids. So Addison's disease is an adrenal insufficiency. You don't produce enough of your own steroids, cortisol. Okay, so how do we treat that? Simply by replacing it with cortisol or some sort of a steroid. Other things, and of course, there's the cortisol uptake test and all that, where you give a dose of cortisol in the morning and then you check it and then you check it and then you check it. Rarely does that ever work in the hospital setting because getting someone to draw blood at the accurate time is bleh. But you can achieve it in your clinic. A smaller operation like that does allow for things like that to be a little more successful. And then you simply treat it by giving, and it's usually a steroid tablet. Other things we would treat with steroids, of course, autoimmune disease, rheumatoid diseases, lupus, cancers, COPD. This, however, is an endocrine course, so for this purpose, let's just talk about Addison's disease. All right. And the book itself really just talks about glucocorticoids as a class, okay? It doesn't really, at least not that I saw, it doesn't really have any specifics for you. Just be aware of, the side effects of glucocorticoids, and probably recognizing someone who has been off of their glucocorticoids and they're in adrenal insufficiency or adrenal crisis, okay? Some people also will have issues with orthostatic hypotension, and it may be an adrenal issue, and we can treat those with steroids as well. And one steroid that is particularly good is fludrocortisone or Florinef, and that does kind of help retain the steroid component of salt, which retains water, which increases the blood pressure. That would be a good quizable question. A lot of people are on Florinef. It's a good steroid. It does help, especially in people who have hypotension with Addison's disease. It's quite helpful. Okay. I will be honest, the book is a little bit short on the endocrine section. I'm sure no one's just crazy disappointed about that, but endocrine diseases are very complex. When you study it specifically, it gets less complex, but it's always a cascade. This hormone comes from the pituitary gland, posterior, anterior, which goes to this gland, which secretes this hormone, which turns on this hormone, which blah, 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 blah. Okay? What I've covered in this lecture will be the highlights for the quiz. For further reading on endocrine, the Barkley study guide for the board's examination has excellent reading on it, and I encourage you to read that. You'll learn more about it in pathophysiology next semester as well, okay? I'm looking at the syllabus right now, and this quiz 6 is scheduled to happen November 8th through 10th, so next weekend. Then after that, we've got the issue of we've got neuro and psych, then geriatrics, then men and women and children's health. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have school wrapped up by the first week of December. So what we'll do is, well, I can't even tell you off the top of my head because I'm just looking at dates and I need to actually look at the calendar. I think we'll go ahead and add neuro and psych into this quiz, okay? Don't get crazy. Believe it or not, neuro is pretty easy. And I'm not saying that just because I practice a lot, but the neurology is just not as impressive as it sounds. Don't tell a neurologist I said that, but there's a time for it to get really particular. But in the primary setting, there are a lot of things you can recognize and treat fairly easily. So let's add that. Psych, we're going to add that too because for our purpose, it's not going to be crazy in depth. The main things we'll need to know about psych really are side effects of psychiatric medications and when the heck to refer them to a psychiatrist, because believe me, a psychiatrist is not a shrink. They are a specialist, just like a cardiologist or a neurologist. They are the specialist for psychiatry, and they're very good at what they do. So I will try to produce those lectures later this week or early next week. Nah, it would really be more fair if I produced them this week. I'm going to go to Missouri Friday and for the weekend to visit with my family. So let me get those up. Let's plan to have the quiz. I'll open it not this Friday, of course, but next Friday and leave it open for a week as usual. Then what we'll do is after all of that, after that quiz is done, then we'll lump men, women, children, and geriatrics into one last module. And we'll spread that out from whenever this next quiz is over till the end of the course. Now, we've still got 2 more discussion boards. I'll probably get discussion board 3 up this week. There was a bonus question that I tossed out in my update lecture, so if you haven't watched those, watch it so you can get those bonus points. And I think that will wrap it up. So what I'll do is I'll watch this video again myself so I can remember what all I just said. And instead of altering the syllabus, I'm going to post it on the information section on Blackboard, okay? And I'll send it to you all in an email. That way we're all on the same page as to what's going down, when, and where. So pay attention, and if you didn't pay attention and you get scared, just text me and I'll say, hey, read this, and you'll be cool. All right, that's good. Good fall weather's coming. I'm excited about that. I'll get you some more lectures up hopefully tomorrow or Thursday for neuro and psych. And then we'll do another quiz next Friday. All right, everybody. See you later.